Brian.
Good evening, viewers. Here from
Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand, Clubhouse, and also those watching via Facebook. I'm Gwen Robinson, former president of the Foreign Correspondents Club. We're very sorry that we're starting a little late, and we're still waiting for one panellist due to some unforeseen problems. So we will start this panel very shortly. Just to say very briefly, this is actually one of our first in-house discussions since the lockdown in Thailand lifted, with a full panel who are physically in the club, which is a good moment. And also, as you might be aware if you follow the FCCT, we've come out of a lockdown, still with some social distancing restrictions, but trying to get the momentum back up on regular programs. We've got a couple of good ones coming up, including on Friday night, a special evening that looks at the making of and the life and times of The Serpent, the serial killer Charles Sabraj, which was the subject of a Netflix BBC series that aroused a lot of interest. We've got some fantastically qualified people on the panel, including one member who interviewed Charles Sabraj over a long period in his Kathmandu jail, plus chroniclers of the era, some great photographs and clips. So watch for that one, both in-house at the club and streamed on Facebook. And in coming days, I think possibly next week or the week after, we'll be doing a program on Thailand's long-awaited reopening, and whether it is in fact really reopening, and what the pitfalls and the prospects are. So please look at our website and Facebook page for those programs. So turning right away now to our topic of the evening, Thailand's new creative power breaking onto the international stage. I'd like to introduce our excellent panel and briefly outline the issues. So on the far right, or my far right, is Gritya Jeep Gawiwong, Artistic Director, Curator, Jim Thompson Art Centre, and also a great figure of the contemporary art scene from, I think, the 90s onwards. Who's going to look at also the lessons of the past. Next to her is Kun Apinan Poshyananda, Chief Executive and Artistic Director of the Bangkok Art Biennale and former Permanent Secretary of Thailand's Ministry of Culture, and an arts practitioner in his own right. And then the missing seat is for Kong Ritti, Deputy Director of Thai Film Archive, film critic and literary translator, and Kong is on the way. He has been held up, so he'll just join us when he gets here. And last but very not least, and closest to me here, is Prabda Yun, author, artist, screenwriter, literary translator, and just recently the winner of the 2021 Fukuoka Prize, a very prestigious prize that only a few Thais have won. And he is executive producer of Netflix original series Bangkok Breaking, which launched last month and is streaming in both Thai language with English subtitles. So to turn to the topic of the evening, as I think we've all seen, the growing success of Thai visual artists, filmmakers, script writers, authors, performance artists and musicians in the international arena, particularly winning prominent accolades at international festivals. Thai films have won major prizes at festivals, notably with the Cannes Jury Award to filmmaker Apichatpong, and prominent placement of Thai feature films at Sundance, Berlin and Venice festivals. Thai artists have become regular participants at headline biennales worldwide, while a growing number of Thai novels have found new audiences through translation. And in an emerging two-way flow, the success of Bangkok Art Biennale in drawing big international names while promoting local artists has placed Thailand firmly on the international contemporary art festival circuit. And in fact, last year I think ranked as possibly the only big international arts event that actually happened amidst the COVID pandemic and restrictions all over the world. Such successes have ignited a discussion inside the country about Thailand's emerging soft power and fueled talk of promoting this soft power and creative economy. But on the questions of who to fund and how such initiatives should be supported, particularly in financial terms, there does seem to be a roaring official silence and basically pitiful funds to promote this new creative power, while a lot of the effort we're seeing in Thailand goes into promoting tourism and, up to a point, traditional arts and crafts. Critics have pointed to lack of government support for new creative initiatives and are also urging the private sector to weigh in, alongside what we are seeing, which is funding from a handful of Thai corporates. The export of Thai culture has long been overly focused on traditional arts, but I think encouraged by the rise of South Korean soft power, including on the popular front the hit series Squid Games and the success of Thai-born Lisa Manoban in the Korean group Blackpink, a new generation of Thai artists and curators is pushing to expand the definition of Thai arts and culture to include the pop culture sector and contemporary creations, and to try and tap into that global stream of content distribution. But the question grows about what does it take for local Thai talents to claim this kind of success, this level of success, also to question whether the sector has enough audience and government support. So can Thailand follow Korea's example? The talent seems to be here, but what's lacking? Well, we have Kongritti finally joining us to also throw his 2 baht worth into the mix. So, as you know, right here we have some of Thailand's top curators, critics and writers and artists to share their experiences and insights on these issues facing the emergence of the country's soft power and creative economy. So I'd like to turn first to Apinan Poshnyananda to kick it all off. Over to you, Kun Apinan. He has a presentation as well, which I think you'll be able to see on screen. And we will be taking questions afterwards, so please save up the really curly ones for these panelists.
Okay, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here again. Thank you for the invitation, Gwen. The topic today is very challenging and very exciting. Gwen has kindly talked about the private sector and the government sector. I have been on both sides, so I hope I'll be able to give some perspective anyway of what is the meaning of soft power. Soft power and this term creative economy. ขอสไลด์กับโอเคครับ we start off with the hoopla of the recent days that Lisa might be coming to the countdown in Phuket sandbox for New Year, and the cabinet is willing to endorse 100 million baht to promote Lisa and Andrea Bocelli to come and sing. You know. In terms of soft, I think this government has been rather the opposite. You know. Okay, better? Better, okay. Because we are quite surprised to hear this, that the Prime Minister is suddenly taking interest in this soft power and creative economy angle. As you know, recently, 7 years of power and ongoing, we have heard not so much of this urge of the government to push creative economy compared with the previous governments. สไลด์ต่อไปนะครับ So, you know, when in 2012, when Lady Gaga came, the reaction of the government, and especially the Minister of Culture, was it just went berserk. The Minister of Culture could not stand Lady Gaga. because she wore this chadar, which in fact is not Thai. It's a hybrid form of Cambodian and Indian headdress. So Kong knows Lady Lada, who was the head of the cultural surveillance of Ministry of Culture, and she actually, wanted to prosecute Lady Gaga because she's thought to have hurt the feelings of the Thai people and pride. Next slide, please. And last weekend we have, yes, the gladiator who came to save us with a beautiful mind. And he's standing with Jefai, as you know, she's a famous restaurateur. And the next slide is Russell Crowe standing next to the Ministry of Culture, minister who is taking selfies. Immediately when this image came out, remember there was plan for the $100 million for Sandbox Phuket countdown. Some PM, ex-MP of the Prachatipat party criticized that instead of pouring money into this, because a lot of money would go to the organizers and the event makers, why not give a prize to Russell Crowe, because he just came and do some selfies. And we all got excited, and suddenly COVID is gone. Oh my God. So in this way, the 3 slides that I showed you is some samples of definitions and variations of soft power. ต่อไปนะครับ Now, as you know, for the past 20 years, Thailand have been trying to catch up or emulate whatever K-pop. And K-pop has been so successful and expanding that Japan panicked, as you know. Hence, Japan Cool. It came out to counter K-pop. But Thailand looked at the K-pop as the sample where they should go and learn from. And this institution, you might have heard, the Korean Creative Content Agency, better known as KOCA. KOCA is based in Seoul, and it's a government support, and they support all kinds of media, ranging from broadcasting, music, game, comics, animation, character licensing, fashion, culture, on and on, as well as next generation content. So this plan is continuous. The governments can change, the prime minister can change, but KOCA remains. So there is continuity for the artists, creative thinkers, youngsters to learn and be encouraged. Now, a lot of the Thai sectors, especially from the government, travel to see KOCA. And we've had conversations with the organizers of KOCA, and they have this translation in Thai, and this is left on the table because there's so many bodies and institutions from Thailand. Just go and meet them. But in fact, they stay there for 15 minutes and then go shopping because of K-pop, because of K-cool, yeah? So in this way, what they try to emulate, ranging from Rain, Gangnam Style, dance, Korean food, BTS, and more recently Parasite and Squid Games. Thailand, with rich resources and creative talent, has never really reached her full potentials due to reasons that I will share with you tonight. So these two players, two characters, who you might be familiar, is Pansak Vinyarat, advisor of Thaksin and Yingluck government, and Gorn Jatikalamit, the former Minister of Finance under Apichatpong government. Both of these figures actually spearheaded soft power diligently. Pansak started off with a grandiose 2 billion baht plan to promote TCDC with design festivals, content industry, compared with Gorn's ambitious endeavor to rebranding Thai film and content, both projects look very alluring and sexy as soft power became buzzwords for funding and finance under respective governments. Next slide, please. But especially with Gorn, he went for the film support. And we have here the comparison of two projects supported by the, what they call stimulation projects by the Apichatpong government. And money was poured into making films and contents. So there were good signs, there were happy days. But in terms of interpretation of soft power, Gong is responsible for actually us removing budget from Tan Mui. Because Gong called me and said that, you know, we were allotted 200 million to promote. And we heard that 150 million was to go to Naresuan. And Gong said, you know, all these people are going to tie themselves up and, you know, scream and pull their hair. So in the end, we managed to twist it round where 150 million went to the young indie filmmakers, script writers, including Joyce, Apichatpong's Uncle Bunmi, and I think 40 went to Tan Mui, and he's never talked to me again. But in fact, he got 300 million from the Ministry of Commerce. So, you know, I think, has narration finished, the episode? Is still ongoing or not? Finish, yeah. Anyway, just two examples of the films. Quickly I show you next. This is TCEF. TCEF, if you recall, in 2010, it was organized by the Ministry of Commerce. It's called Thailand International Creative Economy Forum, where they invited all the experts from UNCTAD, UNESCO, WIPO, ASEAN, especially with the creative economy guru, who was the writer of the book Creative Economy, Hawkins. Hawkins came and he gave a sort of analysis of the future of Thailand's soft power and creative economy. And he felt that Thai soft power needed repositioning in the age of interconnectedness and digital age. Because in the past, Thailand relied on the 4 S's. 4 S's meaning sun, sand, sex, and surrogacy. Now, to move on, it meant that soft power needed human creativity, high technology, and social media. So Hawkins actually concluded by saying that there are some further weaknesses and problems, i.e. corruption, inequality, especially bureaucracy's lack of imagination, and most importantly, instability in political unrest. Only 4 months before the conference, there was the burning of Bangkok, if you recall. And these are some of the characters who have been involved with various governments' interpretation of creative economy. And you can imagine that, you know, when the parties come and lure you for their votes, because the parliament will be dissolved soon and election may come very soon, all these party members will come with their, you know, old wine in the new bottles, saying they're going to do this, that in the creative economy sectors. And a lot of it is dreamland. A lot of it is like, we have proven that soft meaning money, soft meaning cash flow. So you can define it as much as you like. Soft power can also be very political. ต่อไปนะครับ Next slide, please. These are some of the กลับมาก่อนได้ไหมครับ These are some of the figures who have been the forefront, the forerunners. I only give you some examples, whether it be Apichatpong เป็นเอก เลิกฤทธิ์ สมเถา อารยา Yuri, Pichet, and so on. These are the foreigners who have broken the barriers, as it were, on international art scenes, whether it be in, and also Pravda, in literature, performance, film, and all that. But a lot of the times, without support from the government, a lot of the times recognized because of their talent. So in this way, it's almost the opposite of COCA. The Thai support is very much dispersed to various ministries and bodies. The CEA, you hear about it, the Creative Economy Agency, which has been founded for several years now, is one body. Again, Ministry of Culture, Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Tourism and Sports. So when the money goes, you can see that it's dispersed. And each of these bodies compete with one another. They may say that they're working towards a policy of the government, but in fact, their KPI, their budget, everything is very much their own interpretation. So this bureaucratic blindness is really the thing that has made creative economy or soft power in Thailand very limp. Now, next one, please. Just one example of limpness. This film, when the Prayut government came, you know, he saw this Korean military film. I can't remember the name.
Descendant of the Sun.
Yeah, Descendant of the Sun. Yeah, okay. And why did he like? Because it's about military, you know. So he said, you know, yeah, it's military. So he said, make a film. So, in fact, Prachapin Kao was assigned to be the director of this sort of film made in Thailand, in Korea, and in China. And it was going to be thriller, action film, and it was going on, you know, preparation very well. But then the new Minister of Culture came, and he scrapped it. He said that he's going to have his own view of how the film should be made. So this came, Love en route. So Love en route, there were 3 versions of Love en route. Yeah. And it's about this girl who came from US, a Thai girl, visiting Thailand, and she just went around, you know, taking photos and put her images on the IGs. And then she was followed by this man who fell in love with her and then followed her around until they met. And the romance became like a success. And that was part 1. It did not get away with some of the critics, because some of the critics said that this encouraged a kind of stalking, you know, on digital media. So it sort of backfired a bit, but not to be deterred, the Ministry of Culture did 2 more Love en routes. Just an example of some. Next one, please. This is. He's back again. So he's like on that event, the Prime Minister went to Krabi to promote Thailand Biennale in 2018 in Krabi province. He was there for about half an hour, but he did not see one single work of Thailand Biennale. He just went there for the photo shots with the southern dancers, and then he went away. But I should not be too hard on him, because he actually composed some music, you know. You know, this sort of เราจะทำตามสัญญาอะไร So he has cultural talent. Yeah. Anyway, so another next images, please. This was followed by a scandal of the Thai pavilion at Venice Biennale. You know, Thailand Biennale in Krabi, and then Thailand Pavilion in Venice followed one another. And the protests came from several artists who actually submitted their project but was rejected. But instead, it was chosen by some national artists. And the pavilion got criticized because of use of some sacred images. All this costs a lot of money, and the Venice Biennale has been ongoing with a lot of budget from the government. But you can predict that each year, each biennial, the outcome is not so successful. Just compare with our neighboring countries, whether it be Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines, or even China, India. Anyway, just go on. Next slide, please. Gon Jatikawanit, who I mentioned at the beginning, he actually proposed recently. Now he's the head of the GLA party, right? He's actually proposed that the Ministry of Culture should be changed to the Creative Ministry. Because, again, taking the model of the Korean model of KOKA, he said that the ministry should use all the, talents as well as all the technologies, and not just be stuck with emphasis on heritage and traditional art. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. Now. No, sorry. Go back, sorry. No. So these are the bureaucrats of the Ministry of Culture. And how can you change them into creative ministry? Because they have a mindset whereby protect, conserve, preserve, and a lot of them, I can tell you from experience, a lot of them feel threatened by creativity, contemporaneity, especially imagination. So I've just given you some ideas, of this history, rather, 2 decades of definition of soft power. Slide ต่อไปนะครับ. But we have not altogether failed, mind you. There are some local series, Bupe Saniwat, which is a big hit. And sometimes you say that going abroad, sometimes you define abroad international in the sense of Europe, Australia, America. But we must be aware of within the region, like Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, because this Bupe Saniwat was a big hit, in Laos and Cambodia. So it's in this way, soft power by Thai definition can be within the region. And Bad Genius was really great, as you know. Yeah, and in China as well. Now we come to the important part. Yeah. Anyone seen this? I saw it twice. I was absolutely stunned because I was amazed by the talent of Pravda, as well as the Thai ability to create something in Netflix, and it was, I think, Thailand's number one for quite a few weeks. beating Squid Games, mind you, yeah. So, I hope very much that we will struggle together, and even though with or without government support, I think because the DNA of creativity is within the Thai people, I think we should pursue. Next slide, please. I think almost the last one. Almost the last slide, please. Okay, just a quick images of the artists who participated in Bangkok Art Biennale 2018 and 2020. And some of them came, Nara, Ibul, Marina Abramovich, Jejongwa. So instead of sending out Thai talents, international talents also come to Thailand. So in this way, the synergy make it the flow 2 ways for Thai artists as well as the international artists coming. Next slide, please. And maybe, okay, this is the last one. And Pharrell and his family, Pharrell Williams and his family came to 2018 edition of Bangkok Art Biennale. And we think that to do this, and with very, very little support from the government, the answer would be the corporate sectors. There is much hope with the corporate sectors. And the ability to help, support, and nurture contemporary Thai art and creative economy is not so pessimistic, I hope. Thank you.
Well, Kunapinan, thanks for just a brilliant presentation and some very sharply observed and great photos. Oh, there's some more photos. Thanks. We will definitely return to some of those great points you raised, including, I think, the central point, which is the definitions of soft power. I mean, so as you so rightly pointed out, there's some definitions, pretty weird definitions of soft power going around in the Ministry of Culture and other places, and obviously you on the panel have your own definitions. So speaking of definitions, I'll turn now to Kun Gritia Jib Gawiwong as Artistic Director and Curator of Jim Thompson Art Centre. You set up some of the most cutting-edge contemporary art centres in Thailand in recent years, including in Chiang Mai, and are about to launch a new one. But you also have incredible involvement in the spirit of the 1990s when Thailand really saw some things moving. So perhaps you can bring together those insights, contemporary and past.
ขอบคุณค่ะ Thank you everyone. Thanks Kun for inviting me again to share the experience and thoughts about the whole ideas of creative powers and soft power today. And I also thank Ajahn Pinan for showing the whole kind of a grand narrative of soft power, you know, from the more like policy level. And for me, you know, it's going to be another parallel stories, you know, from what Ajahn Pinan is going to tell, from more or less like a small narrative or from the bottom up. What I saw, and I would like to flash back to the good old days, you know, when we are still very young and when there is no COVID and when the world was like, you know, Jai was smiling, like when we can still hanging around in the airport and we can have like coffee with soy bát, you know, in Vietnam easily. And I think in the 90s, you know, when the world witnessed the rise of globalization, and people could cross the borders easily, as I said before, and the art kind of reaped the benefits. And Thailand, along with Southeast Asia and contemporary art communities, become part of this web, right? So we saw many artists and curators join major shows such as APT, which Zoe has been working with, you know, initiated by the Queensland Art Gallery, and the Sydney Biennale, and the Venice Biennale, among others. So in the mid-90s, the alternative spaces and artist-run spaces and collective emerged internationally and out of necessity as the market and art market collapsed, right? In Thailand, after the economic crisis in 1997, the art world was curious about our situation in not only in Thailand, but in Southeast Asia, and wanted to see how artists reflect this kind of crisis. In the terms of politics, it was one of the few moments when Thailand enjoyed a democratic society. If you remember that many countries in Southeast Asia still live through that dictatorships, right? So we got people like, you know, friends from Indonesia, for example, Arayamani. Can you give me another slide? And Jeko, you know, from Singapore, Liven and Myanmar artists, you know, they all came to Thailand because they found that, oh, this is like, you know, a free press, we can do whatever we want, right? And that was happening in the early 90s in Thailand, especially in Chiang Mai, which is the north, and they kind of, there was a major art festival that connect artists from the region, started by the artist collective, and lecturers from Chiang Mai Art University, which in 2021 is totally opposite, it's totally turned upside down, right? So I would say this is like a kind of golden age, of and the beginning of contemporary art in Thailand, where curators like Ajahn Aphinan, also one of those, powerhouse, who really drive this. You're a powerhouse with other people. So why I talk about the 90s? Because I think this was the time when we saw hope and the futures, for contemporary art, not only in Thailand and the region, but I think it's the whole world. And we saw the possibilities, the chance to make things happen, and without any public funding. So we saw how individual and collective works were able to, against all odds, and with limited resources, to realize such projects, such as the Chiang Mai social installation that I show you now. Can you ขอสไลด์ต่อไปค่ะต่อไปอีกค่ะ And then there's another alternative space, and then also the project which is initiated by artists and curators at About Cafe, and Project 304, with which I co-found with my friends. ต่อไปค่ะ And something like this, Bangkok Experimental Film Festival that we did in 2005. I co-curate with Apichatpong, and during those time there was an emerge, the emerge of the yellow shirts movement. So we call that that chapters the Bangkok democracy. And we admit all the films that has been submitted to us, which is about 300 films. So we show all the films, in the public space, 3 nights in a row, with 10 screens, 10 big screens and 20 TV screens. So it's really like a big buffet, for cinephiles. And then I think there was another project that has been very important, for Thailand and the region during this time, which is called Cities on the Move. And that was the best part, of the end of 20th century. And I think this City on the Move has been very important project, which is initiated by the Secessions, which is a collective from Vienna, and they would like to celebrate 100 years, of this art space, which is kind of co-founded by Gustav Klim, and they invited curators, Hans Obrist and Ho Han Ru, right? And what they wanted to look at was, they look back at Asian cities, which they found it was really interesting, because during those time, right, Asian has been, it has been growing very fast, after the economic crisis. So that's why they came to many cities, from China to Japan, and to the whole Southeast Asia. And for us, it was really important in terms of, it was not only the artist that has been kind of packaged, from one region, like what Ajahn Aphinan did, in Asia society, like the tradition tensions in the mid-90s. So I think, from the Cities on the Move is like more or less a kind of second episodes, of the big shows from Southeast Asia and East Asia, and they went around to show from Vienna, and then they show in travel to, I think, in France, Bordeaux, and also in Copenhagen, PS1, right, and London. So that was the beginning of something that has been kind of, for me, I see it a big jump, for the younger generation artists. For example, people like Navin Rawanchaikul, or Montri, all these younger generation who went from art school from Chiang Mai, and then they just jumped, passed through Suvarnabhumi, right, and then joined this big art festival, right. So this is, for me, I see it as super interesting. And then there's a game change slowly in the early 2000s. which saw the birth of art institutions and public art agencies such as BACC and the Ministry of Culture's Office of Contemporary Art, which Ajahn Pinan has been kind of run for more than 10 years, right? So these agencies, is supposed to spearhead the contemporary arts project locally and internationally, but public funding was not sufficient and accessible to the arts community or even available, The Ministry of Culture misunderstood its role. Instead of serving as the policy makers and or grant makers, so they become the organizers themselves. So this limited budget that OCAC received from the Budget Bureau departments, which is quite difficult, maybe to justify, right, why they have to put all this money for contemporary art. But it was, for us, it's like a mysterious black hole that it's failed to be a resources and institution on which we can depend on. And what does that mean? So how did we survive and get there? Or are we there yet? I guess Thailand is a place of a production for many artists. We produce lots of young talents in town, but it was never been the space to showcase the artists. So one of the reasons was the words of mouth and connecting among trans-generation artists. So luckily we had artists like Montian Bunma. Slide ka. So Montian Bunma, he was one of the first contemporary Thai artists who went to Amazon, through the invitation of the Goethe Institute, right? So 1990s, that was the big deal, for people like me, young curators, who was like, every time when Montian went somewhere, to Amazon, he was in Johannesburg, he always come with a story. It's like, oh, he met artists like Marina Abramovic, he met Alfredo Ja. I had beer with that artist. It was like, oh my God, for me, it was super interesting. And then we have people like Riti Ramanija and Ajahn Araya, and all the people that Ajahn Pinan show, right? And curators like Ajahn Pinan, of course, and Ajahn Somporn Rodbun, in the early 90s. And they serve as the gatekeepers of the local artwork. So when the boom of the international biennales and triennials spread in the regions, so most of the curators, and artists came to visit the studios and selected artists for the major shows. And I remember some years around the end of the 90s and early 2000, I rarely have a chance to eat alone. I have to receive a lot of guests, curators, blah, 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 from everywhere around the world, not only like in the region. And I have to translate the menu for these people, It was the good old days, right? So that was how things work, right? So it means that these institutions became helpful in sustaining artists, meaning that the institution elsewhere, not in Thailand. So why isn't generating more wave internationally and at home? So this is a question from Gwen, and I try to understand, why there was not so many that kind of wave or momentum happen, in Thailand. I think it's interesting to see the developments of contemporary art in Thailand from the mid-2000s onwards, the political turbulence, right? 2006 onwards. That becomes a major problem for us, including within the arts community. So since the junta government took power, our national policy has turned into nationalism, and we have gone backwards. You see how it goes, right, with those kind of very traditional, and how the Ministry of Culture is trying to interpret a very square, meanings of cultures, which is in very Thai, cultures. So I think that was, for us, it was, it gave rise to the rebound of the arts activities, right, which become more vibrant today. So the reaction from the art scene was quite interesting because we saw more art institutions, galleries and museums, as well as biennales and triennials emerge, especially since the late 2000s. For example, private museums emerged in Bangkok, like the one near Don Mueang Airport. And then somewhere like it's also some galleries, around the country, for example, in the Deep South, as well as in the Northeast, right? And there was a small space, in Rajbury called Ban Nok. They were invited to join the Documenta this year, right? So can I have more slides, please? So this is, and we also have artists. I forgot to mention the name after Montien Bunma, like people like younger generation than Montien and Rakrit and Apichatpong, right? Arin Rungjang, he was also in Documenta. ต่อค่ะ Prashya Pintong, who's mostly work across borders, not only in Asia, but in Africa, Mongolia, and everywhere. Yeah, next please. And Gorgrit Arunanonchai. So I think these people, they connect the world, to us, and they connect us with the world. And I think what I wanted to focus on is, if we are thinking about how Thai artists or Asian artists was, participated in this so biennales, it's very Eurocentric, What I'm interested in was the function and, the whole kind of infrastructures that Thailand slowly can accommodate it. And when we as an artist and curators turn our role from being the guest to the host. For me, I saw it slowly in the beginning of 2000, when Jim Thompson Art Center started, and then we have BACC, right? And then later we slowly have the spaces like, My Iem, in around 2016. As well as this, biennales like BAB, as well as Ghost Festival. So I think those moments is quite interesting, to observe how the role has been changed. ค่ะ ต่อค่ะ So I think, at the moment we have lost almost 2 decades in Thailand to political instabilities, and to fight for social change by younger generations, which is highly inspiring. And the way we move in a cha-cha-cha step was a price that we paid. However, what we gained was a highly awareness and active citizens, both in the art scene and in the society at large. This is, for me, I see it's very helpful situations. So for the future questions, what is the future? And I think, what I mentioned before about the role of the institutions, that exist, in the north and also around the countries. This is what we did, at the moment, at my Iem Contemporary Art Museum. We slowly kind of work with the regional institutions as well as the major institution in Europe. Like, for example, this exhibition was initiated by the Goethe Institute, and it's collaboration between my Iem and Singapore Art Museum, Gallery National in Indonesia, and Hamburger Bahnhof in Germany, Berlin, right? So I think this internal institutional collaboration is quite new, in the region. ต่อค่ะ So we invited artists from the collections of 4 museums, the one from Southeast Asia as well as European artists. We also show Joseph Beuys, as part of his celebration of his 100 years there. So please go to Chiang Mai if you guys have time. Now we have a flight, like ค่ะ ต่อค่ะ And also in Isan, in Khon Kaen, Eric Booth, the co-founder of my Iem, also decentralized himself, and the institution to the northeast. And I found that quite interesting because we got a lot more younger generations to hang out and have coffee, and selfie with arts, at my Ili. ค่ะต่อค่ะ And this is going to be the next chapter of Jim Thompson Art Centers. We are going to open on 27th of November as part of the Galleries Night with the exhibitions of the international artists that we we did the open course. It will be about 14 artists from all over the world, including with Bosnian artists who based in Norway. It's about the Cold War, and we're trying to kind of connect with Jim Thompson context, at some point. So go back to the ideas of soft power. If we look at the ideas of Joseph Nye's soft power theory, which derived from military terms from the Ministry of the State Departments and international relations during the Cold War, and it's about public policy and culture diplomacy, which later pump a lot of money on arts and culture program through the UCIS and UCIA during the Cold War, right? So, but for Thailand, we are a very small country as a buffer state, so we don't have powers to threaten people, nor we don't have enough money to pay to convincing people, but we have culture diplomacy, which we use successfully since 19th century, okay? Don't forget that we sent the first Siamese pavilion to the World Expo 10 years after the Crystal Palace. So that was the first missions of soft power by King Rama IV, okay? So if soft power is the ability to attract artists in order to obtain support, Thailand already have that kind of power. So we can find the evidence in Joseph Nye's book itself, right? He wrote about Thailand. He said, oh, Thailand, a small country, they also have soft power, which is what? Food. It's not sex and sun and sand, but Thai food is around the world, right? I just watched this kind of documentary that in Alaska, there's 24, a small town in Alaska, there's 24 Thai restaurants. And that's like, why? That's interesting. So what about Thai contemporary art? I always compare our contemporary art to the blooming cactus flowers in the desert. I can't believe that we can grow with the limited support from the public and private sectors. So what we need in the future are changes in terms of policy, of supporting contemporary art. We want the public sectors to create the policy that generate an art council or something like COCA, or the grants that support contemporary arts focusing on excellency and intellectual debates, as well as allowing the arts market to grow. For private supports, tax deduction should be made available, so I don't have to feel like I'm a baker when I ask the monies from the corporate. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Kritia, for running us through everything from the early 90s to now. You raised a lot of issues, which I hope we can come back to, particularly this your reference to the earlier days, and also these periods of great creativity that have surrounded around political turbulence, which I hope is a theme we can come back to. But for now, I'd like to turn to Kun Kong, if you're ready for it. You're a member of the panel who spans both literature and have been responsible yourself for some great literary translations, as well as great literary criticism and the film critic as well. And at the Thai Film Archive, you're actually also reviving, or at least trying to keep alive, or maybe reviving appreciation of the older, the earlier eras of some great Thai film. And so maybe you can also comment on where did all that go? Where did all that creativity go? But anyway, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Gwen. I think Ajahn Pinan and Jeff Pitiya have given us a big picture to take us on a tour of what has been going on in the past 20 years or so, mostly in contemporary art. So I think I will add a little bit more, again in general, but I would like to focus also on film and maybe literature, and of course Pravda will have a lot to say about literature and film as well. When I was talking to Gwen about this panel, we thought about okay, we should include the visual art sector, but also I mentioned to her that Thai talents, Thai artists have been very active internationally in many fields. We have quite a few well-known theater troupes that have gone on to perform internationally. Even right now, I think one is in Paris or something. B-Floor, right? B-Floor is very internationally well-known, and their shows are quite political, especially during the past few years. And that's the theater people, which hopefully one day we can represent them here. And literature, of course, Pravda has had quite a few books of his translated into English. And I translated one novel by Kun Weerasethakul, the Sea Right winner, and another one is coming out. Okay, this is not a place for promotion, but I just want to give you the
That's all right, you can promote it.
the big picture of what's going on. So another one is coming out, another novel of Weerasethakul that I have already translated into English. But everything takes a long time in the year of COVID, everything gets dragged on. So hopefully before the end of the year. So again, and there's a new publishing house called Soy. I'm sure you have heard of them. Soy is run by a group of a few people, but they're very enthusiastic, and they are publishing. They've been publishing a lot of books, art books and philosophy books, and they in Thai text and also in translation. They are going to publish another translation of a famous Thai novel by Utit Hemamoon, and that one has been picked up by, I think, by Penguin, Southeast Asia, so it's a big deal. So, and then we have music. Of course, quite a few, Som Thao, of course, he's been doing this orchestral music and perform in foreign countries for many years. But also, we have a rock band, Slot Machine, which is English album, produced by an American producer who produced U2 or something. And of course, visual art, we have so many talents in visual art. And film, well, we can go on forever, because for some reason it seems like film, cinema, is the field that can travel the best, can cross over into the international perception better than any other fields. So of course we have Apichatpong. We did so many films, and this year he had a film in Cannes with Tilda Swinton. But also there are 4 or 5 more Thai films that have played in the International Film Festival circuit since January. Like a film by Taiki Sakpisit, a film by Bas Natawut, who made Bad Genius, which was a big hit in China. But he has a new film this year. And also tomorrow, I think Ban Chong is releasing his horror film, The Medium, which he co-produced with a Korean company. So I'm saying all of this because I just want to say that there are people who work on soft power already in different fields across the board in Thailand, in literature, in film, in fashion, in music, in theater. But I think lately when we talk about soft power, actually I don't quite like that term. I think soft power has become, like Ajahn Pinan said, it has become a buzzword that has been exploited by politicians and policymakers, or anyone who just wants to sound cool, because you say soft power and you look like you are more sophisticated and you are cooler than you actually are. Especially if you are an old politician, then you say soft power. You don't have to care what it means or what it entails, but then you look better, you look sexier because you say the word soft power. When in fact, soft power sometimes it just means art and culture, like people who work in the arts, people who work in the cultural sector, or creative economy or creative industry. I prefer that than soft power, which is becoming more and more empty. So I'm sketching this picture of this exceptional talents in different fields to say that there are people in Thailand who've been working on soft power, but lately when we talk about soft power or creative economy, it becomes a policy issue or a state sponsor issue. Like, okay, the question revolves around, okay, how much support should we get from the government? And the government themselves is trying to get their foot into this momentum. So we have to separate this into two issues. Like, okay, soft power, we have it. Thai food, Thai artists, Thai literature, or whatever. And then there's the attempt of the government, of the policy makers, to incorporate soft power into their policy textbook, especially when the election is coming up. I think this is good because in the next election, I'm sure that they will have to talk about it.
I think all parties should have.
Yes, I think all parties in the next election, they cannot avoid saying, okay, this is our cultural policy. This is our soft culture policy. They have to advertise that kind of policy when in the past we have never seen it before. Okay, so here I don't have any slides and I want to push it. I want to push it to Prabda very quickly. So I have a few points to raise. Just a few points. First, I think when we talk about creative power or soft power, and also in terms of policy or what when it has to do with the government, I think the government or the policy makers, they are confused between soft power or creative power with Thainess or the Thai quality. They are obsessed by the idea of using soft power or creative power to promote Thainess or Thai quality, whatever that means, whatever the definition of that is. And that's the problem. The definition of Thainess or Thai quality, the official definition, is very narrow. It means traditional culture. It rarely means contemporary culture. So when they talk about soft power, when they talk about creative economy, in their mind, this thing, the function is to promote, is to advertise Thailand abroad. And this word Thailand means Thai culture in the traditional sense for the most part. Lisa Blackpink, well, it's such a big thing, no? She became like the icon of soft power. Everyone mentions her name. Again, just mention Lisa, it makes you like look younger or look sexier. So with Lisa, if you notice this Lisa Blackpink phenomenon, Ajahn Pinan has already said this, they are very obsessed with her headdress, the Shada, because that's the Thai thing, or they think it's a Thai thing. They don't care that she doesn't represent Thailand in any way. She's a Korean product. She's manufactured by this Korean company to sell to the world. There's nothing to do with Thailand. Even if she wears this Shada, it has nothing to do with Thailand at all. And the fact that she's from Buriram, she's from Isan, well, that part of her identity has never been used as one of her features when she promotes herself, or when Blackpink promotes Lisa. Thailand or Buriram it's not part of the identity of Lisa or Blackpink. But suddenly we want to claim that, oh, Lisa is from Thailand, Lisa is from Buriram, she likes Luk Chin Ping. Her favorite food is fishball in Buriram. Come on, she never said that. Or she said that, but it doesn't mean anything, right? So Thailand, Thainess, Thai quality, they want the policymaker, the government, and now we're going to hear this a lot from the politicians running in the next election, that, okay, the meaning of soft power in relation to Thailand or Thai quality or Thainess. Thai culture, traditional Thai culture. We have to press this question hard. What is your definition of Thainess? What do you mean by Thai culture? You have to be able to answer that. And Lisa, you can't just talk to her about the headdress. It's not what she is. Okay, that's the first point, the definition of Thainess. The second point is when you talk about soft power, you have to talk about artists, writers, translators, but you also have to talk about the lighting guy in the film set. You have to talk about the makeup girl in the film set. You have to talk about the translators who are struggling because they make so little translating. You know, I spent 2 years translating a book, and I'm proud of it, but I cannot, nobody can make a living translating books in Thailand. In other countries, you can do that, right? So, as long as you talk about soft power, but you don't care about the human resource, you don't support the young people, the young artists, you don't support the artists who are not very famous, you don't care about the film crew who are not even eligible for the government support during COVID. Because there's a form that they have to tick.
There is no.
And they cannot choose their profession because there's no film crew in the tick box.
No artist, right?
Artists too. So as long as you talk about soft power without caring about the human power behind it, then you are a hypocrite. Again, this is what we have to push with the politicians in the next election. You talk about soft power, don't make it look sexy. It's not sexy, it's labor. You're talking about the labor market. How do you support the artists? How do you support the small people on the film set, on the TV series set, the people who work in museums, the people who work in galleries, the people who work for theater troops, and they rarely make enough money, and they have to teach at university to support themselves or something like that. So it's hypocrisy, it's insincerity if you talk about soft power without talking about labor, and this is a problem. Film crew are trying to set up a labor union, to demand fair wage, to demand proper working hours and things like that. This is a policy thing, and I think politicians, political parties have to talk about it. They cannot just talk about Lisa without talking about the makeup person who put makeup on Lisa's face. So that's the second point. The third point, and then I'm finished. Creative economy. I just want to stress that if you talk about creative power, you cannot just focus on the economy. You have to focus on the first part. The more important words between the two is creative, not the economy. Of course, I understand that creative economy, you need to sell it in order to bring in the money and to keep the wheels turning, to support I talk about labor, I talk about people have to make a living, of course, so it means you have to make this an economy. Again, like Korea. We are talking about soft power because we see Korea and how they so successful in boosting that GDP through film series, TV series, or movies, or music. So, of course, the economic part, the economic factor is important. We need to bring in some money, but we just have to admit that something, we still have to promote or support something that does not sell very much. We need to support, or the government or the political parties, the politicians, they have to see the importance of art. And sometimes art doesn't sell. Not everyone can sell their painting for $1 million. Even if you sell your painting for 2,000 baht or 200 baht, you still have to recognize these people as artists, as part of the soft power sector. Apichatpong, again, when he made his films 23 years ago, when he started out, he made movies that nobody wanted to see. He couldn't nobody wanted to see his films. And look at him, 25 years later, he made a movie with Tilda Swinton. He's a new master. He's welcome everywhere in the world by all museums, galleries, and cinema people. So something just doesn't sell. We can not measure the success of soft power or creative power through the economic numbers only. Okay, we don't refuse that. That is important, but because when we talk a lot about soft power and economic, creative economy, we tend to forget that even if something doesn't bring in income or money, it's still important. We just cannot forget that fact. And I think all 3 points that I have raised are relevant among each other. The definition of Thainess, how do we define creative economy and soft power and Thai culture. The second part is the human resource. We need to support young people in the art scenes. And if we don't support them, we don't have the creative economy. And third, we cannot commercialize everything. Something doesn't have any commercial value, but still it's important, and we still have to support it. I think that's my take on,
thank you.
On this round.
Some excellent and highly relevant points. I can see a pattern developing here, which is each speaker is bringing up these concepts that need defining and definition. So maybe we can actually come to some agreements on those. Over to Prabda, who has both the easiest and hardest job, which is going last. So hopefully you might fill in the gaps, and also you're perfectly positioned to maybe join some of those dots, being sort of operating on so many levels and sectors of the so-called creative economy. So over to you.
Thank you, Gwen. Thanks for having me here. Good to see everyone, and it's a pleasure to speak here for the second time, and delighted to see old friends here. I haven't seen them in a long time, not because of COVID, but just life. What I'm going to talk about probably will feel like a conclusion of what everybody's said already. I don't have slides. I should learn that I should have slides so that, so that people don't get bored. My voice is, I'm told many times, it's monotone, so this is going to end not with a bang, but a whimper.
You could try and be provocative.
Yeah. So I think that when we speak about a possibility of generating soft power in the areas of culture as opposed to politics, there are usually 2 basic paths. One is the largely rogue path, and the other is the institutional and proactive path. Perhaps we can say that the rogue path is somewhat passive, meaning that it doesn't usually position itself as intended soft power. I think it's safe to say that Thai artists, and what I mean by artists, for convenience sake, is just to include everybody in the cultural field, who have considerable exposure outside of Thailand, mostly belong in the rogue path. They are individuals who either seek their own ways toward international platforms, or they are discovered or approached by international platforms for one reason or another. And the reasons vary. It's not always the case that foreigners approach Thai artists because they are interested in Thai culture, in quotes. Often these platforms are self-serving, in the sense that they are just searching for what they want. And some Thai works happen to fulfill their needs. In the case of literature, this is perhaps the most difficult area for Thailand to have consistent contribution internationally, for the simple reason that there are too few translators of Thai language to other languages. Here's one. And for English, which is the most useful language in terms of exposure, there are only 2 or 3 individuals currently active. For Japanese, there are 2 that I am aware of. For Mandarin, there is 1 in Taiwan, maybe a couple in China. From my own experience, for other languages, publishers would have to settle with translation from the English translation of the Thai work that they wish to publish, which is not really ideal, but there are simply no other options. Now, who are these publishers and sometimes publish Thai literature? They are, oh, this is weird. Mostly independent presses that specialize in translations of foreign language works. In other words, it's already their main objective to seek works from different languages. So if they can find capable translators and works that agree with their interests, they are more likely to want to publish them. Do these translated works perform well in sales? Not usually. Of course, you get the occasional breakthroughs now and again, but those are exceptions. There are no ways to predict such successes, not even if you have a Thai astrologer handy. Everyone just hopes to be lucky someday. But how do these publishers survive financially? They depend quite a lot on grants. In countries like the US, the UK, Japan, South Korea, many European countries, and some other Asian countries, there are translation grants provided for their domestic publishers and translators. Some countries give out grants to foreign publishers who wish to translate and publish works by their authors. Some countries encourage both directions. South Korea set up an institution especially to promote Korean literature through translation, called Literature Translation Institute of Korea. This was founded in 1996. And it took them years to see Korean literature becoming more known internationally. They have been publishing a modern-looking magazine with translations of Korean fiction and essays even before there was any significant international interest in Korean culture. They give out grants to foreign commercial publishers that wish to translate and publish Korean works. And now their efforts are paying off, obviously. This is an example of the proactive path, which has to be funded or supported with commitment and clear objectives by an institution like government. Usually governments that see importance in this kind of so-called soft power are liberal and democratic. Authoritarian governments are obsessed with control and conservation. Either that or they are too poor to be active in such activities anyway. What does it mean to have governmental support and to be proactive? It means that two important objectives happen simultaneously and complement each other. One is to open doors and windows for local talents, give them grants, send them out, promote them, congratulate them, celebrate them, treat them as the best representatives of their nation, whatever their works may be. The other is to cultivate new talents, provide them with good resources, offer the best education in their fields, encourage experimentation, give them hope. Thailand has seen some exciting rogue cases over the years, but the nature of being rogue is just unpredictability, and there is never any guarantee that they will persist. If a country is serious about having cultural presence on a global scale, its government must make it a national mission. And this brings us to the often discussed case study of South Korea. In my opinion, it's just ridiculous to compare Thailand to South Korea, period. Just like Japan before it, South Korea's success is no accident. It's not a rogue case. It was almost a collective will of the nation to make South Korea a world superpower, to defeat Japan and China, to have the respect of the West, or to the white people in general. When I was studying in New York in the 90s, South Korean parents began sending their kids to American universities. The Japanese used to do that in the 80s and early 90s, but suddenly New York was full of young Koreans. It started to be fashionable to frequent the so-called Koreatown in Manhattan. I also noticed that the Korean kids tended to sympathize with the minority groups in the US. They wanted to be regarded as equal to Americans, but also better. Samsung replaced Sony. Now a Korean film has won Best Picture at the Oscars. Korean pop music tops charts worldwide. So my point is all the results of years of persistent hard work and a lot of investment. They set out to rule the world, and they went about it systematically. They spent a lot of money to make this happen, but they also have the talents ready to prove that it's not an accident. And now whether that is something for which all nations should strive is a different debate. Thailand, on the other hand, is self-congratulatory. Our governments have mostly fit the profile of the ultra-conservative, if not downright authoritarian. If Thailand really cared about having influence on the world stage, it would make sense for the government to take advantage of the successes of the rogue individuals and push them even further through strong support. So far, it appears that they don't care at all. They even rather turn a blind eye toward the individuals whose successes undermine or challenge their ideologies. Apichatpong, again, for example, would have done much better had he been conservative or obedient. To win top awards at Cannes is no small thing. In fact, for Thailand, it was unimaginable for a long time until Apichatpong changed that perception. Yet, our government doesn't care. The road path is hard and full of obstacles, so people don't survive on it for long. We do not have a Samsung. We have a lot of super rich people, but unfortunately they seem to have simple and selfish visions, not thinking about the benefits of the nation as a collective identity. So I have to conclude from my own experience internationally anytime soon. These are not talented. Not because in Thailand, but because the people in power are only preoccupied with ways to safeguard their power rather than to champion the brilliance of Thai talents who have great potential to shine.
Thanks for that rather challenging prognosis. Saying is that that Thailand won't be a soft power. You will still have to win accolades all over the world, but soft power? With government support?
Yeah, well, if you take the case of South Korea, that's totally the case. I mean, they are determined to happen behind the scene that most people don't see. For example, in the US, because it's just K-pop, but they put money into it. They have people, they are investing in the US, giving money to their products. So it's not
the definition of soft power. One of your key points, and also Kunapinan Gritya. So do you have anything to say on that? Does it really require, can it be done without government support? Are we all saying that you've got to have the government in order to project soft power? You certainly need it for hard power.
I think actually I would like to hear from the military people to speak about soft power, because actually but actually from Joseph Nye's ideas, right? He's a strategist. He's military strategist, so that's why it comes from the war zone, right? And instead of making a hard power, and that's why they put a lot of money in USIA, right? And USIS. And I'm a product of that soft power because I study English at the USIS in Chiang Mai. So I was like, okay, so I think it was quite successful. I was brainwashed, and both from America and the Thai government, right? So I think it was quite interesting to see that. But the ideas of soft power that the Korean play, I think it has to come with one more thing that Kun already spoke about, the attempt of Korea to be a superpower. You know, it has to be better than China and Japan, right? Is the policy. And the other one, which is a key point that we don't talk about, is the freedom of expression and the democracy. You know, because after 1988, right, in Gwangju massacres, Korean lifted the censorship law in 1996. That's how everything started. And I once met with the film directors department, and they talk about this, you know, the censorship laws, right, and the freedom of expressions, that they can produce any kind of films that they want. And the Korean films institution, they say that you can produce any kind of films, either the commercial films, the art films, or any kind of film, sell or not sell, it's fine. You know, I think that kind of attitudes, you know, I think we need it from our imagined government, which we don't know when we will get it. Yeah. Thank you.
Right.
I just want to add that sometimes, you know, now we know that things like abstract expressionism or jazz, you know, went around the world because there was funding from the CIA. But that doesn't mean that these things are going to make people love the U.S. So there is space in there if you let art out in the world. You'll get people loving it, but at the same time be critical about it. So, you know, in a way, I think the CIA, I think, made a mistake of spreading abstract expressionism and jazz, because in the end, those things tend to turn, you know, to turn around, and because they're by nature sort of anti-establishment. So there is that kind of spirit in such art. So if you let it go free, you find both people who are obsessed with it in the wrong way, and you also find people who criticize it and be critical.
Right. Kunapinan, you're looking very thoughtful, and do you think on this question overall of whether, you know, you can project soft power without proper government support? I mean, you've been on all sides of the fence.
Yes, I think the government must help if we will try not to get to the level of South Korea, but at the level of ASEAN, let's say, just within ASEAN to begin with. We look at Vietnam, we look at Singapore. You know, the index of creative economy countries within Asia. In fact, Japan is still leading Korea. Japan is fourth, and Korea is level down, and Thailand has dropped down to 34, below Singapore. In fact,
What index is that?
I can't recall it. It will come.
It's a soft power index.
Yeah. Soft power index,
Right.
but by some universities and.
Right. Clearly with a set definition and criteria.
I'm just saying that, of course, there must be government support for it to have the ripple effects and the value chain effects. Because after all, creative economy was thought or invented so that people can use brain rather than destroy nature. You know, in order to use technology and creativity rather than using natural resources. So that's the original idea that came about it. The military, you know, if you're going to ask the Thai military to come and talk about it, they can, you know, and they study, they read John Hawkins, but they at the National Defense College, they study culture, they study all these theories, but like many bureaucratic bodies, they have the ability to twist it for their own use.
Right.
Like the examples they gave on the slides, you know. They know all this, but So you have two binary polemics here, of double polemics of the military and the bureaucrats. And the strongest party in Thailand are called bureaucrats, because they never go away.
Right.
You can have as many coups as you like, you can change the government. The bureaucrats is the strongest party in Thailand. So like I said, they would have to compete among themselves in order to get budget. It's all about budget, so that they can satisfy their KPI each year, each fiscal year, and then go around again.
Right.
It doesn't matter if they did not succeed with the KPIs, but that's over. The next year comes. But interjection of political parties may change. I gave you example of Gorn Jatikonit. He has the brain, well, more than others anyway, to talk about it and to project the idea that if he comes back, he would change Ministry of Culture into creative ministry. But I asked him, when he was in power as a vice prime minister, why didn't he do it? Because he was under the Democrats who are less imaginative? I don't know.
Right.
But Apichatpong certainly is not creative.
Right.
Stiff upper lip, but not creative.
Right. Well, in fact, it was under Thaksin, I think, that we saw the rise of TCDC and then under Yingluck,
Yes.
more creative industry initiatives. But anyway, maybe it all goes back to Kong's definition of soft power and creative industry being exploited by a bunch of old men trying to look sexy, which was a pretty good definition.
I think another word we have not mentioned, all of us, is propaganda. I think they confuse between soft power and propaganda. So, especially in Thailand, because if the government wants to support a creative talent, if the government wants to support a creative talent, and if that person doesn't produce the kind of work that correspond to the official definition of Thai culture in their mind, then the government will be put in an awkward position. Right. Let's say if they give money to an artist and they produce this subversive work against the military, then they won't know what to do about it. So the way they do this is to control the content.
Right. Hence we saw the recent case where it was withdrawn.
Exactly, and I think without freedom of expression, you cannot have creative. You cannot have any productive, creative economy. Right. Again, it's another case of hypocrisy. If you don't give like full freedom, okay, you can do whatever you want, you can make any kind of film you want, you can paint anything you want. If they don't say that, okay, you have this freedom, then don't talk about creative power, don't talk about soft power, it's bullshit.
Right.
Again, next election, if anybody mention soft power, ask them, will you abolish censorship?
Yes.
Answer then and there. I hope you can put up a panel here.
Yeah.
All the
Come and listen.
yes, and okay, I will ask one question. What do you think about censorship?
Right.
What do you think about 112, section 112? What do you think about, putting the young people in jail? You have to answer that because it's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing.
So you've really stretched the definition of sort of soft power and creative arts and all that, creative industries.
Yes.
But let's, can we turn to, we actually have just about run out of time, but we've got questions from the floor, including our FCCT Vice President and BBC correspondent, Jonathan Head. Over to you, Jonathan. Is it on, Jonathan? Yep, it's on. It's on.
Jonathan Head from BBC and on the FCCT board, as well as Gwen says. Really interesting presentation. There was such a big focus on government and the recognition of the role that government has played in South Korea. I know you were fairly disparaging about big business in Thailand, but in other countries I've lived in, I remember when I was in Turkey, some of the big corporations were tremendous supporters of the arts, funders of orchestras, of great art collections. And I wonder whether perhaps the newer generations of entrepreneurs, even in the very big conglomerates that dominate Thai business, might offer more potential for financial support of the arts in the future?
Who would like
That's to anyone.
Well,
Yeah.
I would say in the past, Bunrod Brewery, Singer Beer, has been very supportive. Yeah. But from my own experience, I would say that presently the Thai beverage has been, how can I say it, pumping money into support of not just creative, but also heritage. So in this way, there is still hope. Like I said in my paper, that even though the support from the government is very up and down, more down than up, the rise of soft power through corporates is still hopeful. I give the example of the Bangkok Art Biennale. We're going to have our 3rd edition. We started in 2018, and to be able to continue it at this level and to keep the standard is really not just Thai beverage, but other corporates. They call on for how can I put it, support money into this policy, whether it be Central Group or Siam Paragon or One Bangkok. The criticism would be that these are corporates and they are using it to propagandize or show their brands. But so what? So if you're going to be so selective, no government support, no corporate support, then you have nothing. So in this way, I think we try to get the balance whereby in this atmosphere of culture of fear, that there is some outlets for the artists to express themselves. In the last Bangkok Art Biennale, there were many images of dissidence, of disobedience, of political criticism, but we still have not, heard anything from the military.
Right.
Not yet, anyway. So.
Well, I think you're basically saying that with proper and substantial corporate support, it can offset lack of government support in overall projecting soft power. And let's not forget, particularly in Korea, the amount of money that Korea Inc. and also now Netflix, $500 million into Korean entertainment to create more Squid Games, I suppose. But, there's been a lot of business investment in soft power in Korea with the view to making a profit. I think if Kunapinan, you could make BAB wildly profitable, perhaps you would attract more if companies could get dividends out of it.
Yeah.
Maybe the profit motive also can offset the drive. But does anyone have any further comment on Jonathan's question?
Just a little bit. I don't really think that's a problem really in Thailand. I think Thai corporates do support quite considerable amount of culture and art. But it's really because they also depend on the government a lot. On certain topics, they will not touch. So it's still sort of similar to dealing with the government itself, because you can do things to a certain extent, and then there's a point where it's almost the same as dealing with the government, even if you're dealing with a corporate company. So.
Yeah, I would add to that, because if anyone wants to do something very critical and very specific topic, you really know where to go, and that it was less than a fingers that you can count. And sometimes they don't even want to be named, right? And I think it was quite a sad situation. But I'm really ambitious, and I think we are entitled to have the public support. That actually it was written in our constitution, and that has not been reenacted. And I think the arts community now, we are discuss about doing a long-term campaigns of creating another agencies, which I don't know how that we can do it, something more or less like an art council. We need that grant agencies to support this kind of non-commercial artistic activities. And I think for the corporate supports, we should adjust the legal issues that, the corporate should get the tax
The same
deduction,
tax,
right?
yeah, other
And it's not
incentives.
only corporate, but for the individuals, right? At the end of the years, if you like to support anyone,
Oh, that doesn't exist now?
no. So that's
At
why
all.
So I think maybe in Japan or Korea, but I know in the US, they have that kind of incentive, right? Or even in Singapore. So that's why, they got a lot more corporate support than us. For Thailand, most of the support from the corporate, it's mostly they comes out from the PR and CSR portion, which, for the major corporations, they already have a lot, right?
Right.
So if they give so and so 25% of the budget, to something like BAB, it's still okay for them.
Right.
But I think for the rest,
So maybe
We
that
should
could be
dis-
suggested to political parties ahead of the
Right,
election next year. Okay, so we have time for just one last question. Goes to you, Leica. Please keep
yeah.
it short.
Yeah, no, mine are more comments, than,
We can't hear you properly.
okay,
Yeah.
mine are more comments than questions. I just
Just
feel
identify yourself.
Lekha Shankar, I write, I'm a freelance journalist from India, living here. I think BAB is proof that you don't need government support at all. And what's great about BAB is, is that you promote Bangkok artists. It's not just an international event, like the International Festival of Music and Dance, which is the biggest event here. But there's no Thai element at all there. I mean, everybody knows the event, but there's no Thai element at all. What happened to the Sea Right Awards? That was a very big thing in the ASEAN region.
What happened to it?
We don't hear about the Sea Right Awards because that was a big literary event.
Oh, Sea Right.
Sea Right
Well,
Awards.
that still happens.
No, does it?
No, that's still on. Yeah,
Oh.
they gave an award this year.
Maybe I missed all the big events
I think
of
you missed
the
it.
award. Just a point about Korea, because everybody's been praising Korea, but even the Busan Festival had a problem with that one film, and it nearly got called off, right? When they didn't want to show that film on that boat that sunk. So
So what's the question, Leica?
the question is censorship. There was a problem of censorship in Korea, and I think in ASEAN, compared to ASEAN, I think Thailand scores. Singapore, I don't think is better than Thailand where censorship is concerned. Laos, Cambodia, name it. So if censorship is the issue, I think we are one level higher, and even Korea has faced problems with censorship.
Okay, thanks. Okay, very quickly,
I
because
just-
there's one more question.
I just want to address, it's good that Lekha brought up Busan International Film Festival in Korea, and the problem that the festival had with one film. Okay, just to give you a little bit of background, I think 5 or 6 years ago, there was one documentary film about the sinking of that ship. I can't remember the name of the Sewol ship. Where a lot of kids died in the ship. So there was a Sea-One Ferry, yeah. So there was a documentary about that incident, and Busan International Film Festival wanted to show it, but the government didn't want to. They wanted to ban that film. But I raised this question exactly because this is my point. This is our point. You know what? When Busan banned that film or tried to ban that film, it was because Korea at that point had a right-wing government, Park Geun-hye. She wanted to ban that film because, it fits with her politics. Korea, throughout the 25 years that we saw them rise as the superpower in the culture industry, they have
Can you talk to the mic?
they have had liberal governments throughout from the late 90s until right now. That 4 year was a blip when they had a right-wing government, and Bong Joon-ho, the Parasite director, he was blacklisted by that government. So the point is, you cannot become a soft power, a soft power superpower if you are conservative. If you have a conservative government, you can never have a thriving cultural industry if you have a conservative government. Look at China, right? They try so hard, but they just couldn't cut it, and they keep trying.
Yeah.
You know, but they can compete with Korea or Japan, and I think this is the
Interesting
key.
point.
If
You
Thailand
can't
wants to,
manufacture it.
yeah, if Thailand wants to, again, if they want, if they promote this soft power thing, then they have to go a little bit left.
Right. Okay, another election issue, huh? Okay.
We have a
finally-
bad news here. Thai government just signed a contract with the Chinese government
For what?
to promote the soft power.
Okay,
This
that's
is the bad news of this week.
Oh, wonderful. We've got finally one more question from the ambassador of Austria to Thailand, Eva Haga. Eva, you can ask it from there.
Yes, yes. Hello,
Yes.
you can hear me? Yes, well, as the ambassador of Austria, as it has been said, of course, I'm not going to interfere into political questions in Thailand, but it's very interesting to listen to all these very diverse opinions. But my question is very precise. When will we finally see Kun Apichatpong's film? Anybody has an idea? I mean, also maybe like a Shankar, she might have an answer to this because she asked about censorship and so on, and she has also a hand in promoting the show of films. But maybe anybody has an answer to that, because I am interested and I want to go and to see the film, which has already been screened in the world in Cannes and has won a prize. Thank you.
Okay, well, I know.
I cannot speak for the team,
Yes,
but the latest I heard is February.
February.
The latest I heard is February 2022. I cannot say this is how accurate this information is, but I heard that it's going to be February because it makes sense, because the film was nominated for the Oscar by Colombia.
But can we also...
So that is the Oscar season, February, so it makes sense.
And maybe you can throw a spotlight on other outstanding Thai films that are also not getting
this year,
screenings in Thailand.
yeah, thank you so much, Gwen, because apart from Memoria by Apichatpong, there have been quite a few interesting Thai films going on internationally. I mentioned this horror film, The Medium, which is opening tomorrow. This is a co-production between Thailand and Korea, and it was already released in Korea, and it made a lot of money in Korea. Earlier this year, there was a film called One for the Road. One for the Road. It was shown in Sundance Film Festival, and hopefully it's going to open soon. This one I'm not sure, but hopefully really soon. And it was Thai and Hong Kong co-production, but the film was shot in New York. The film was shot half in Thailand and another half in Manhattan. So One for the Road, that's the title. It's coming for sure. And there's another film called Anatomy of Time. This one went to the Venice International Film Festival, which is the oldest film festival in the world, very prestigious. So Anatomy of Time, and it just came out last month. So again, hopefully by the end of the year or early next year, you might see Chakawan Nintamrong, also a visual artist, Chakawan Nintamrong, Chakawan, Anatomy of Time. And I should mention also Taiki Sakpisit film, The Edge of Daybreak, The Edge of Daybreak. Taiki is also a visual artist, experimental filmmaker. His works get shown a lot in galleries, but he just made a feature film, The Edge of Daybreak, again at the end of the year, I'm sure. This one, hopefully December. So quite film. Ratchapum, yeah, that's a short film. Actually, it came out last year. Ratchapum, what is it called? Anin Sidang. This is a well-known Thai short film that has been going to many places around the world since
and
last
can
year.
I just add to that Kong Riti himself wrote an excellent piece about all this that's available on Nikkei Asia, www.nikkeiasia.com. It's asianikkei.com, sorry. Anyway, so these are ones to keep an eye out for. And on that note, I would really like to thank all of you. I thought that was an outstanding discussion. The video will be on our Facebook page if you want to recommend it to people. I think that was the smartest and most informative discussion on why we haven't got and why cultural policies might figure in the next election, which I hope you're right, Kong. And also, hopefully, we will be hearing more about this topic in future events, and maybe also from Kun Apinan about the forthcoming BAB. Can I also for those who viewed on Facebook, can I just say, please look at on our website and Facebook page details. If you enjoyed the live stream, please consider donating. The club is trying very hard to get back on its feet after extended lockdown, and it's very easy to donate anything from 100 baht to 1 million baht or more if you like. And watch our website and Facebook for forthcoming events. Don't forget the Serpent on Friday night. And I'd also like to thank Kun Tam over there, who handled this rather complicated session tonight. And thank you everybody for attending. Thank you all. Good night.
I really like it. At the beginning, we